Imagine for a second that an airline needs to hire a new chief pilot.
Okay.
Right, so they have this candidate who has flown commercial jets for like 25 years. I mean, this person has navigated typhoons over the Pacific. They've safely landed planes with, double engine failures.
Wow.
Yeah, they've managed to cruise through medical emergencies at 30,000 feet. Just incredible battle-tested stuff.
Kind of pilot you definitely want flying your plane.
Exactly. But so when this pilot sits down for the actual job interview, the panel doesn't ask about any of that.
Wait, really?
No. Instead, they slide this piece of paper across the table and say, you have 5 minutes to recite the exact torque specifications for the bolts on the left landing gear of a 2018 Boeing 737. Go.
That's ridiculous.
Right. And when the pilot hesitates and says, well, I'd usually just look that up in the maintenance manual or ask my lead mechanic, the panel just exchanges this disappointed look.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they make a little note on their clipboards and they flat out reject the pilot for lacking technical depth.
It sounds like an absolute comedy sketch.
Yeah.
You would never want to fly on that airline.
No, you'd be terrified.
You'd just assume the people running it have completely lost their minds.
Right. It's completely absurd. And yet, and this is why we're doing this deep dive today for you listening, if you look at how the modern corporate world hires its most senior, experienced technical professionals, it's exactly like this.
It really is.
We're talking about the architects, the strategic leaders, the people tasked with steering massive digital infrastructures. This exact pilot scenario is playing out thousands of times a day.
Yeah, it's a massive blind spot.
Because we are currently living through this era where technology, artificial intelligence, business models, they're all evolving at an absolutely blistering pace, right?
Oh, the ground is shifting underneath us daily.
Exactly. But the way organizations actually assess the people supposed to lead us through all this chaos, It is stubbornly, almost comically stuck in the past.
It's an incredible paradox. Organizations are building rockets, but they're interviewing the astronauts using like a driving test from 1995.
A driving test from 1995.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that this isn't just a minor administrative glitch. When an enterprise cannot accurately identify the architects of its own future, that is a systemic organizational failure.
Yeah, it's not just a bad afternoon for HR.
No, the stakes are much higher than just a frustrated candidate walking out to their car after a bizarre interview. The stakes are the survival and the resilience of the company itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I've been reading this deeply thought-provoking set of notes and research from a framework called the Architecture of Assessment, Rethinking the Experienced Professional Interview.
That's a fantastic tactic.
It really is. And it forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question, which is, are we interviewing experienced candidates fundamentally the wrong way? Like, have we completely lost the plot on how to measure human professional value?
We absolutely have. And to understand why it's broken, I think we have to look at how dramatically the definition of value has shifted.
Right. Especially recently.
Exactly. Especially in just the last few years. Because the premise we really need to establish first is that the traditional interview, it was built for a completely different era of knowledge work.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's built for a time when value was tied directly to rote memorization and, immediate manual execution in a very static environment.
So like an era where if you knew the exact syntax of a programming language by heart, you were literally the most valuable person in the room.
Because there was no Google.
Right. No Google, no Stack Overflow, and certainly no AI to do it for you. You were the walking encyclopedia.
Precisely. Your brain was the database. If you could recall the exact command line flags or the specific configuration steps from memory, you saved the company hours of time.
Which translates to money.
Exactly. So naturally, interviews were designed to test that memory. They essentially became trivia contests.
Because memory was the bottleneck.
Right. But if we look at the landscape today, that static environment has completely evaporated.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, we can't ignore it.
We really can't, because we cannot talk about how human value is shifting without talking about what the machines are doing right now. AI has completely pulled the rug out from under the traditional technical interview.
It's completely flipped the script.
Think about it. We now have large language models that can handle syntax perfectly. They can write boilerplate code in milliseconds.
Milliseconds. It's wild.
It is. They can run complex code comparisons, search thousands of pages of technical documentation, and, generate summaries faster than a human could even open the file.
Yeah, the rote memorization that we used to prize so highly, it's been commoditized.
Exactly. Machines do it better, faster, and cheaper.
Which raises a really important question. If a machine can do the baseline syntax and the rote memorization, what is the human actually being paid to do?
Right. Why are we giving this person a salary?
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the advent of AI has caused the value of the human professional to shift definitively upward.
Upward how?
Well, at the senior level, the premium is no longer on tool recall. The premium is on judgment.
Judgment. Wow. I love that word. It feels heavy.
It is heavy.
Like it feels like something you just can't download.
Because you can't.
Yeah.
You really can't. Judgment is the culmination of lived experience. It's failures. It's complex problem solving. It's interpretation.
So it's not just knowing the code.
No, it's the ability to look at two perfectly written pieces of code, both generated by an AI, and say, okay, option A is mathematically more efficient, but option B aligns better with our long-term business strategy.
Oh, that's such a good distinction.
Right. Or knowing that option B is easier for our junior developers to maintain when things go wrong at 2 a.m. It is trade-off analysis.
Navigating the messy stuff.
Exactly. How do you navigate a project when the requirements are ambiguous? How do you step into a highly political corporate environment, identify the weak assumptions everyone's just blindly following, and, respectfully challenge them without getting fired?
Yeah, that's not something ChatGPT can do for you.
Not at all. That is what a senior professional does.
Right. You are paying a senior architect for how they think, how they navigate the fog of war, not for what they can recite from a manual.
Precisely.
But, and here's the massive contradiction that the research points out, companies just don't seem to realize this when they write their job descriptions.
There's a huge disconnect.
It's crazy. You'll see a posting for an enterprise cloud architect, and the job description is basically poetry.
Oh, it's always so grand.
Right. It asks for strategic vision, leadership, cross-functional business alignment, and, the maturity to guide our digital transformation.
Are they asking for a general to command the army?
Exactly. But then the candidate walks into the interview room, and the entire grand vision just shrinks.
It evaporates.
It collapses into this incredibly narrow, microscopic test of exact stack familiarity. The panel doesn't ask about how the candidate handled a massive cloud migration failure.
No, they never do.
They ask, can you write the exact JSON syntax to configure a specific firewall rule in AWS on the whiteboard right now? It's a pop quiz.
And this is where the cognitive disconnect happens. When an interview panel does that, they aren't actually assessing the candidate's ability to do the advertised job.
What are they doing then?
They are testing the candidate on the mechanic's job. And what's worse, if the candidate answers honestly and says, look, I don't memorize that specific JSON syntax because the tooling changes every 6 months.
Which is totally true.
Totally true. And the candidate might say, I focus on the security governance model and let the delivery pipeline handle the syntax.
Which is the mature answer.
It is. But the panel doesn't see that as architectural maturity. They penalize the candidate. They write down on their little scorecards, lacking hands-on technical depth.
Okay, wait. I really want to dig into that because I can hear the pushback from technical hiring managers listening right now.
Oh, I'm sure they're yelling at their speakers.
Right. I can hear them screaming, but wait, if I'm hiring a technical leader, shouldn't they actually know how to build the thing? Isn't deep, immediate, hands-on implementation knowledge the only real proof of competence?
It's the classic defense.
Yeah. They'd say, if they can't code it on the whiteboard, aren't they just an empty suit, just a talking head?
It is the most common defense of the broken system. And honestly, it sounds completely logical on the surface, which is why it's so dangerous.
Right. It feels like common sense.
But if we break it down, especially for senior roles like enterprise architects or, chief information security officers, that logic just falls apart.
Why does it fall apart?
Because the assumption is that technical strength is a single vertical ladder. You start at the bottom writing simple code, and you just get better and faster at writing code until you reach the top.
Like it's just a straight line of typing faster.
Exactly. But that isn't how technology careers work. At a certain altitude, technical strength fundamentally changes shape.
How so? Give me an example of how technical strength looks different for, say, a 20-year veteran versus a 5-year developer.
Okay, so for a mid-level developer, Technical strength is indeed implementation depth. It's knowing exactly how to optimize a specific database query in PostgreSQL.
Getting into the weeds.
Right. But for an enterprise architect, technical strength is pattern recognition. It's practical governance.
Pattern recognition.
Yeah. It's the ability to look at a massive multi-million-dollar proposed solution and say, okay, the vendor is promising this will scale seamlessly, but I've seen this exact architecture pattern fail under load 3 times in my career because it creates a hidden bottleneck in the data ingestion layer.
Oh, man. So they are seeing the ghost in the machine before the machine is even built.
Exactly. That is a perfect way to put it. An architect's job is to challenge poor assumptions before they harden into expensive concrete.
Before you spent $10 million on a mistake.
Yes. They absolutely must understand enough technical detail to make sound design choices and, to command the respect of the engineering teams.
Sure.
But, and this is the crucial distinction, they do not need to be the deepest, most hands-on operator in every single category today.
Right.
If a company claims they need a strategic visionary, but interviews them entirely for operational implementation level mastery, they're just applying the wrong standard of measurement.
It's like my pilot analogy earlier, but let's take it to urban planning.
Okay, I like this.
It's like interviewing a senior urban planner, the person designing the traffic grids and the sewer systems for a city of 2 million people.
A massive job.
Right. And demanding they prove their competence by laying bricks faster than a 25-year-old mason.
Wow. Yes.
Right. Like, yes, the urban planner needs to know the properties of brick. They need to know its load-bearing limits.
That they can't be ignorant of the materials.
Exactly. But if you test their bricklaying speed as the primary metric of their competence, you're going to hire a really fantastic mason, put them in the planner's office, and end up with a city that has 0 traffic flow and a catastrophic flooding problem.
That's a perfect illustration of what happens. And this misalignment, it leads us into one of the most pervasive cognitive blind spots in modern hiring.
What's that?
The research defines it as mistaking familiarity for capability. It's the illusion of competence.
Okay, let's unpack mistaking familiarity for capability. What does that actually look like when you're sitting in an interview room?
It usually manifests as the stack matching problem.
The stack matching problem.
Yeah. Let's say a candidate walks into the room with 28 years of real-world, battle-tested experience. I mean, they have built systems, survived crashes, managed massive budgets.
A heavy hitter.
Exactly. But the interviewer sitting across from them is currently hyper-focused on one specific modern tool. Let's call it Tool X.
Okay, Tool X.
If the candidate hasn't used Tool X in the last 6 months, the interviewer's brain takes a mental shortcut. The interviewer unconsciously judges the candidate as technically weak, simply because the candidate lacks immediate fluency with the interviewer's favorite local tool.
Even if the candidate has spent the last decade using tools A, B, C, and D, which do the exact same conceptual thing as Tool X.
Precisely. The interviewer ignores the decades of macro-level wisdom because the candidate doesn't speak their specific hyper-local dialect of technology.
That's wild.
They equate recent familiarity with actual capability.
But why do interviewers do this? Are they just being arrogant? Like, what's the psychology there?
Not usually. It's rarely malicious. It's a function of cognitive load and, honestly, lack of preparation.
Lack of preparation.
Think about the average interviewer. They're usually an engineer or a manager who was pulled away from their actual job 10 minutes before the interview started.
Oh, yeah. They're probably thinking about a bug they have to fix.
Exactly. They are stressed, they are behind on their own sprint tasks, and they haven't been trained on how to conduct a proper architectural assessment.
Right.
So, their brain panics and reaches for the most immediate, measurable metric available to them. Do you know the thing I was working on this morning?
Can you fix my problem right now?
Right. It's a defense mechanism against the complex, exhausting work of truly evaluating a senior professional's long-term career narrative.
So the interviewer shrinks the world down to the size of their own current desk.
That's beautifully said.
And if you, the candidate, don't fit on their desk, you fail. That is incredibly frustrating. Think about the real-world implications of this for a second.
It's massive.
How often does a seasoned professional offer a brilliant, hard-won, big-picture insight in a meeting only to be dismissed because they didn't use the trendy acronym of the month?
All the time.
Their wisdom is literally blocked by a vocabulary test.
It's deeply alienating. And the consequence for the organization is severe because familiarity is not capability. A candidate can know a specific software product perfectly. I mean, they can know every keyboard shortcut, every hidden menu, and still make completely disastrous, naive architectural decisions that cost a company millions in technical debt.
Because knowing the buttons doesn't mean you know where to drive the car.
Exactly. Conversely, a veteran might need 2 weeks to learn the exact syntax of a new tool, but their underlying grasp of design patterns, security implications, and risk management.
That's the stuff that saves the company.
Exactly. Will save the company from an existential failure 2 years down the line.
Which means companies are actively filtering out the exact people they need to protect them, simply because those people didn't spend their weekend memorizing the latest software update.
It's a tragedy, really.
And this brings us to a really fascinating and honestly kind of dark psychological shift. Because candidates aren't stupid.
No, they're highly adaptable.
Right. They realize this is how the game is played. And when senior talent is forced to prove themselves on narrow, junior-level metrics, they fundamentally alter how they present their history.
They adapt to survive the system. And this leads to a phenomenon where the truth actually performs worse than framed narratives.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the performance of truth.
Yes.
Because the research suggests that in modern interviewing, a highly polished, heavily rehearsed, interview-friendly answer often succeeds brilliantly, while the honest, nuanced, messy reality of actual experience completely bombs.
It's unfortunate but true. If we look at how interviews are structured, especially with standardized behavioral questions, they demand a very specific type of storytelling.
Right.
They want a clear problem, a heroic action taken by the candidate, and a flawless, measurable result.
The classic STAR method: situation, task, action, result.
That's the one.
Every career counselor on the planet tells you to format your answers this way.
Exactly. But real senior-level experience almost never fits into a neat STAR response.
Why not?
Because real experience is chaotic. It involves incomplete information. It involves difficult, irrational stakeholders who refuse to compromise.
Office politics.
Yes. It involves massive budget cuts halfway through the project, vendor bankruptcies, and solutions that are held together by duct tape and prayers.
So, okay, if I'm on a panel and I ask a candidate, tell me about a time you designed a secure cloud architecture. There are two ways this goes, right?
Right.
Candidate A gives the polished, framed answer. They say, I analyzed the requirements, I selected the optimal tech stack, I led the team through a 2-week sprint, and we delivered a perfectly secure, infinitely scalable platform ahead of schedule.
It's a beautiful fairy tale.
Exactly. And how does the panel react to candidate A?
Oh, they love it. It's easy to understand. They can check all the boxes on their little HR scorecards.
Demonstrated leadership, check. Delivered results, check.
That's silly.
But then candidate B comes in, and candidate B is a 20-year veteran. When asked the exact same question, they sigh, lean back, and say, well, it's rarely that simple.
The honest answer?
Right. They say, on my last major project, we inherited a legacy mainframe we legally couldn't turn off. The vendor lied about their API capabilities. Half my engineering budget was reallocated to another division.
Real life.
Exactly. We had to build a transitional hybrid cloud bridge while the bridge was actively on fire. We eventually stabilized it, but the architecture wasn't elegant. It was a survival compromise based on brutal business constraints.
And what does the untrained panel do with candidate B's honest answer?
They hate it, don't they?
They penalize it. They interpret the nuance as hesitation. They interpret the compromise as a lack of technical purity. The research calls this rewarding confidence packaging.
Confidence packaging.
Yes. Candidate A confidently recited a theoretical textbook solution, completely blind to the real-world complexities. Candidate B saw all the complexity, navigated it, and spoke truthfully about the friction.
Because the friction is the job.
Exactly. But because the panel lacks the maturity to understand that friction is the job at the senior level, they punish the veteran.
Confidence packaging. That phrase just hits so hard. We are literally rewarding the packaging over the contents.
We really are.
And the terrifying extrapolation from this is that when your hiring process consistently rewards framing over truth, you are not finding the best candidate. You are simply finding the candidate who is best at surviving your specific interview format.
Yes.
You are hiring the best auditioners, not the best architects.
Which introduces a profound vulnerability into the enterprise. You are filling your most critical strategic roles with people whose primary skill is narrative simplification.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Very. When the inevitable crisis hits, you don't want someone who only knows how to tell a neat story. You want someone who knows how to navigate the messy reality.
So we have this environment where truth is penalized and polish is rewarded.
Right.
Now let's throw gasoline on that fire.
No.
Let's introduce money. Because the research brings up a dynamic that I had honestly never fully considered before. The psychological weight of the highly paid candidate.
Or the premium candidate tax.
Right, the premium candidate tax. What happens to an interview panel when a candidate with a massive premium salary requirement walks into the room?
The entire emotional temperature of the room shifts instantly. Whether the panel openly discusses the salary or not, they are acutely aware of the cost.
They know this person is expensive.
Exactly. And that cost triggers an intense psychological reaction. Fear of risk.
Because if they hire a junior developer for $70,000 and it doesn't work out, it's a minor annoyance.
Right. You mentioned about.
But if they hire a senior VP of architecture for $300,000 plus stock options and that person fails,
It's a disaster.
suddenly the interview panel is on the hook for a massive, highly visible mistake.
Precisely. The panel members start asking themselves, is this person really worth that premium? How am I going to justify this decision to the CEO?
Is my job on the line if this person is a dud?
Exactly. Wouldn't it feel safer to just hire someone cheaper or someone whose background looks exactly like mine? The objective shifts. The psychology of the panel moves from a mindset of discovery, trying to uncover the candidate's unique value, to a mindset of defense.
Defense. So from minute one, the highly experienced candidate isn't walking into a neutral evaluation.
Not at all.
The burden of proof is heavily stacked against them just because of the price tag attached to their years of experience.
Yes. And when a weak, untrained interview system becomes defensive, it goes on the attack.
It attacks the candidate.
Subtly, yes.
Huh.
Instead of trying to understand the broad, macro-level shape of the candidate's value, the panel actively begins searching for reasons to disqualify them.
They're looking for an escape hatch.
They want an escape hatch.
Sure.
They want to reduce their own anxiety about making a high-stakes decision. So what do?
They revert back to the trivia test.
They revert back to the trivia test.
Right. They zoom in with a microscope. They ask the $300,000 architectural visionary to write a script from memory. And the moment the candidate stumbles on a minor piece of syntax, the panel breathes a collective sigh of relief. They didn't know the command line flag for this one specific microservice. Clearly, they aren't worth the premium salary. We dodged a bullet.
It's a self-soothing mechanism for the panel. They use a microscopic failure to justify rejecting a macroscopic talent.
That is so wild to think about.
It completely absolves them of the hard work of assessing true seniority. And as the research notes, this doesn't mean the candidate lacks value. It simply proves that the process lacks a maturity to recognize value at that scale.
Which brings up a massive glaring question.
Okay.
If panels are this defensive, this prone to cognitive shortcuts, and this easily manipulated by confidence packaging, who on earth is sitting on these panels?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Who gave them the authority to make these life-altering, company-altering decisions? This brings us to a phenomenon I found absolutely riveting in the research, the mirror effect. Let's talk about interviewer credibility.
This is a critical pivot in how we need to think about hiring. There is a deeply ingrained assumption in almost every corporate culture that organizational membership equates to assessment maturity.
Meaning what exactly?
In other words, if you work here and you have a senior title, you are automatically qualified to interview other senior people.
Right. You're a VP, so obviously you can hire a VP.
Exactly. But the research explicitly tears that assumption down. Job title is not the same as credibility. Just because someone is inside the building does not mean they know how to evaluate complex talent.
Yes. I feel like that should be printed on a poster in every HR department. Being inside the building does not make you a talent evaluator.
It really doesn't.
So what does a credible interviewer actually look like? The research sets a really high bar for this.
A credible interviewer possesses a very specific set of skills. They know what actual success in the role looks like, independent of how they personally do their own job.
Oh, that's hard to do.
It is. They can separate different kinds of strength. And crucially, they have the intellectual humility to recognize expertise that does not look exactly like their own.
Wow.
A credible interviewer can listen without ego.
And that ego point is exactly where the mirror effect crashes the system. I've seen this happen so many times. When an interviewer lacks that credibility and that humility, they start silently making the candidate compete against the interviewer's own specific knowledge,
Their own vocabulary.
their own working style. The interview stops being about the requirements of the job and becomes entirely self-referential.
The silent question the interviewer is asking is no longer, can you do this job? The question becomes, are you exactly like me?
Do you solve problems the way I solve them? Do you use the words I use?
Exactly. Every experienced candidate brings a unique shape of value. One candidate might be an absolute genius at digital transformation and change management. Another might excel at deep back-end platform governance.
Both valuable.
Extremely valuable. Another might be incredible at stakeholder influence and negotiating with hostile vendors. These are all valid, critical strengths for a senior role.
Right.
But a weak interviewer only notices the strengths that resemble their own. If the candidate relies on a different mental model or expresses their expertise differently, the interviewer unconsciously converts that difference into a disqualification.
You don't sound like me, therefore you must be wrong.
It's a profound cognitive blind spot.
And there is a specific, very sensitive dynamic where this blind spot goes absolutely nuclear, which the research dives into. The cross-generational interview.
This is a very delicate area.
Right. What happens when you have a panel led by a significantly younger interviewer, say a 28-year-old lead engineer assessing a 55-year-old candidate with 3 decades of experience?
It happens all the time in tech.
It does. Now, we have to be really careful here. For you listening, this isn't about bashing younger professionals. Many young leaders are incredibly thoughtful, fair, and technically brilliant.
Absolutely. The issue is not the age or the inherent skill of the younger interviewer. The root cause is a systemic organizational failure to prepare people for the weight of authority.
Yeah, throwing them to the wolves.
When an organization throws a younger interviewer onto a panel to assess a massive industry veteran without proper calibration or training, they are setting up a psychological trap.
Because that younger interviewer is sitting across from someone who has been in the industry longer than the interviewer has been alive, that has to trigger massive imposter syndrome.
It creates an intense internal pressure. The younger interviewer feels a sudden, urgent need to prove their own authority. They feel they have to demonstrate to the room, to the candidate, and to themselves why they are the ones sitting on the power side of the table.
So what do? They go on the offensive.
Precisely. They become overly skeptical. They might adopt an aggressive, challenging posture, or they fixate intensely on exposing microscopic knowledge gaps.
Trying to find a chink in the armor.
Yes. They take the conversation deep into the weeds of the exact operational tools they use every single day. Tools the veteran might not have touched recently.
Because the veteran is managing the people who use the tools.
Right. But the interviewer isn't doing this to assess the candidate's strategic fit. They're doing it to validate their own status in the room. They compare the veteran's long-form, macro-level strategic thinking against their own hyper-current, micro-level operational fluency.
It's an apples to oranges comparison.
And when the veteran inevitably stumbles on a micro-detail, the younger interviewer assumes the candidate is weaker.
That is just a profound tragedy for everyone involved. The younger interviewer is acting out of a place of unexamined pressure and discomfort, trying to establish a dominance that a mature process would never require them to establish.
Exactly.
And the older candidate is having decades of hard-won strategic vision completely dismissed because they couldn't recite a piece of operational trivia. It's a complete breakdown of communication.
It really is.
Different experience is not lesser experience, it is just a different shape of strength. But because organizations don't train people to recognize those different shapes, human ego and cognitive shortcuts turn the interview into a chaotic mess.
And this is where this story takes another fascinating turn.
Yeah.
Because organizations aren't entirely blind.
They know something is wrong.
Yes. HR departments and executives look at their hiring outcomes and realize that their human panels are biased, inconsistent, and messy. They know the system is broken.
So what do? Do they fix it?
Well, instead of doing the hard work of training their people, they panic. They look for a shortcut. They desperately search for something clean, mathematical, and neutral to make the decision for them.
Which brings us to the false comfort of objectivity. The panic pivot to math and machines.
Yes.
Entered the standardized aptitude test and, increasingly, artificial intelligence. Let's start with the aptitude tests, because the research is absolutely scathing about how these are misused for senior technical roles.
Scathing is the right word.
We all know these tests. The abstract reasoning puzzles. The timed numerical shortcuts. Which of these complex geometric shapes comes next in the sequence?
If train A leaves Chicago at 4 p.m.
Yes. You get 30 minutes to answer 40 questions.
These tests were designed for entry-level screening or very specific cognitive baselines. But applying them to a senior executive or an enterprise architect is logically incoherent.
It makes no sense.
The research points out the absolute absurdity of this. An architect is not paid to solve artificial abstract puzzles in a vacuum under a ticking clock.
Right.
A chief information security officer is not hired because they are the fastest at a generic logic screen. They are valued for navigating messy human stakeholders, judging systemic risk across multiple departments, and making difficult decisions when there's no perfect mathematical answer.
My favorite analogy for this, and I think about this every time a friend tells me they had to take one of these tests for a VP role, is that it's like trying to hire a master chef to run a 3-Michelin-star restaurant. And to assess their mastery, you give them a time test on how fast they can chop onions.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. Now, is chopping onions fast a skill? Yes. It measures raw knife speed, but it tells you absolutely zero about their ability to conceptualize a groundbreaking menu, source rare ingredients, manage the chaotic egos of a kitchen staff.
Or balance a massive food budget.
Exactly. Or design a dining experience that wins a star. You've accurately measured speed, but you are completely, totally blind to mastery.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize the trap. The test creates a powerful illusion of objectivity. It produces a neat little score, an 85 out of 100.
And HR loves a clean number.
They do. It's easy to administer, easy to score, and most importantly, it's easy for the hiring manager to defend to HR if the candidate fails later. Well, they scored an 85 on the logic puzzle.
Don't blame me.
Right. But convenience for the process does not equal relevance for the role. You are measuring the wrong thing with extreme precision.
Measuring the wrong thing with extreme precision. And if the onion chopping test is bad, the illusion of objectivity becomes actively dangerous when we look at the new trend the research highlights: the introduction of artificial intelligence into human resources.
This is perhaps the most critical warning in the entire framework. We are seeing a massive surge in organizations using AI tools, applicant tracking systems powered by large language models, to screen transcripts, summarize candidate answers, and even score technical interviews.
And on the surface, if you are an overwhelmed HR director, this sounds like a miracle.
It sounds perfect.
It sounds modern. It sounds efficient. Let's remove the biased human panel entirely and let the neutral, objective AI read the interview transcripts and score them.
But the research issues a severe caution here. The danger arises when human resources relies heavily on these AI outputs without possessing the deep technical background required to challenge the machine's interpretation.
So they just blindly trust the AI.
Exactly. If HR is not technically grounded and they let the AI system become the ultimate arbiter of a senior candidate's technical capability, they are outsourcing judgment without accountable expertise.
Let's break down mechanically why an AI would fail to score a senior candidate properly. Because we talked earlier about how real senior experience is messy. It depends answers.
It involves trade-offs.
Exactly. The research points out that AI systems fundamentally are just massive pattern matching engines. They tokenize language and look for semantic proximity to the data they were trained on, which is usually standard textbook documentation.
Exactly. AI expects the confidence packaging we discussed earlier. If an AI asks a candidate to describe a cloud deployment, it expects to see specific keywords.
Like what?
Kubernetes, Docker, CI/CD pipelines, auto-scaling groups. If a candidate is a junior implementer, they will rattle off those exact keywords, and the AI will score them highly.
Because it's a one-to-one match with the training data.
Yes.
But what if the candidate is a 20-year veteran?
The veteran might give a broad, deeply reflective, highly contextual answer. They might say, well, the deployment mechanism is secondary. The real challenge is establishing the financial governance so that auto-scaling doesn't bankrupt the department.
Which is a huge issue.
Right. And ensuring our legacy identity access management integrates cleanly with the new cloud perimeter. The veteran is talking about macro-level risk.
But they didn't say the magic words.
No, because they didn't use the standard rapid-fire tool-level vocabulary the AI is looking for. The AI's pattern matching fails. The AI flags the veteran's answer as weak, non-standard, or irrelevant.
It penalizes reflection. It penalizes nuance. And if the HR professional looking at that dashboard doesn't have the technical maturity to look at the transcript and say, wait a minute, this AI output is completely misinterpreting the candidate.
They're actually describing a highly advanced governance pattern.
Right. If HR can't see that, then that incredible candidate is silently rejected by a machine.
The framework is absolutely firm on this point. AI should assist, not decide. It should inform, not conclude.
That's a great rule.
But human nature craves certainty. We tend to treat technology as a neutral authority simply because it produces results in a clean, authoritative format. A neatly formatted dashboard score is not the same thing as deep understanding.
No, it's not.
Efficiency is not the same thing as fairness. If HR leans on AI just because it feels safer and easier to trust than their own human uncertainty, they aren't fixing the problem.
What are they doing then?
They are just hiding weak assessment behind a veneer of modern technology. They are replacing human bias with algorithmic rigidity, and they are calling it progress.
Okay. We have completely dismantled the current system. We've shown how the focus on familiarity over capability ruins interviews. We've shown how truth is penalized, how interviewers project their own cognitive blind spots, and how AI and generic tests offer nothing but a false, dangerous comfort.
It's pretty bleak.
If I'm an executive listening to this, I'm probably sweating right now. Because the question is, how do organizations actually fix this? How do we rebuild this to hire for the future rather than the past?
There is a way out.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the research doesn't just complain about the broken house. It provides the blueprints to build a new one. Let's talk about rebuilding the architecture of assessment.
The foundational principle of this new blueprint is a radical shift in mindset. Organizations must accept a simple truth. Interviewing is a skill.
It's not a personality trait.
No, it is not an innate talent. You cannot assume that just because an employee is a brilliant technical coder, they automatically know how to evaluate human capability.
Right.
Assessment is a distinct formal discipline. And like any discipline, it requires active, ongoing training.
So no more pulling a random engineer out of a sprint 5 minutes before the interview and handing them a resume. What does HR need to do to formalize this discipline?
The research lays out a very specific operational framework. The first step is mandatory, role-based interviewer calibration.
Calibration. What does that mean in practice?
This has to happen before the candidate even enters the building.
Yeah.
The panel must sit down and agree on what the role actually requires. They need to define what technical strength looks like at this specific altitude.
Getting on the same page.
Yes. They have to explicitly agree. We are hiring a senior architect. Therefore, we will not test them like a mid-level implementer. We are testing for judgment, not syntax.
That alone would change 90% of the bad interviews out there. Just getting everyone to agree on what the target actually is. What's next?
The second step is comprehensive cognitive blind spot training. Organizations need to educate their panels on the mental heuristics that derail interviews.
Like the ones we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They need to train on similarity bias, the mirror effect we discussed, where interviewers favor candidates who look and sound like them. They need to train on recency bias favoring candidates who use the tool the interviewer used yesterday.
And the age dynamics.
Yes. They need to train on authority dynamics so that younger interviewers don't feel the need to use trivia to establish dominance over older candidates. Interviewers need to understand that these cognitive shortcuts don't just happen in a vacuum.
They dictate the whole conversation.
They dictate the type of questions they choose to ask and how they interpret a candidate's hesitation or confidence.
It's about making the invisible mechanisms of the brain visible to the interviewer. I love that. And then how do we structure the actual panel? Because if you just put one heavily biased person in charge, the whole thing falls apart.
Which is why the third step is enforcing strictly balanced panels.
Yeah.
The framework advocates strongly against allowing any single interviewer to dominate the outcome.
Makes sense.
If one person is the sole judge, their personal mental models dictate the entire result. A balanced panel divides the assessment dimensions deliberately.
So everyone has a different job.
Exactly. You might have one person whose sole focus is evaluating technical macro grounding. Another person is assigned to assess architecture judgment and risk analysis.
Okay.
A third person is evaluating stakeholder navigation and influence. A fourth is looking at leadership maturity. This prevents the trivia trap, because no single person can disqualify a candidate just because they missed a minor detail in one specific area.
You get a 360-degree view.
It creates a composite, multidimensional picture of the human being.
And to tie all that together, HR needs to introduce structured, evidence-based scorecards. The research is brutal about this. We have to banish vague, subjective feedback.
Oh, the subjective feedback is the worst.
You know the feedback I'm talking about? The panel says, I don't know, they just didn't feel senior enough, or they weren't quite a culture fit, or they lacked energy.
That soft, ambiguous language is exactly where unexamined heuristics and poor judgment hide.
It's a cover-up for bias.
A structured scorecard forces the interviewer to justify their numerical rating with actual, concrete evidence from the conversation. If you score a candidate low on architectural vision, you must point to the specific scenario in the interview where their vision fell short.
You can't just say bad vibes.
Exactly, and you have to contrast their answer with the established baseline of what a good answer should have been.
Okay, so we fixed the structure of the panel. Now, what about the actual questions? If we are throwing out the coding whiteboard tests, the trivia pop quizzes, and the abstract logic puzzles, what replaces them? How do you assess a technical genius without asking them to write code?
The framework suggests replacing those narrow tests with scenario-based architecture discussions. You move away from asking what and start asking how and why.
Okay, how and why?
You conduct design trade-off analyses, stakeholder challenge simulations, and problem framing exercises.
Give me an example of a good scenario-based question.
Okay, instead of asking, what is the command syntax to configure a load balancer? You present a messy, real-world situation.
Lay it on me.
You say to the candidate, you have just joined the company. We have two very powerful engineering teams. Team A is demanding we move our entire infrastructure to a monolithic architecture because it's faster to deploy. Team B is aggressively demanding we use microservices because it scales better.
And they hate each other.
They hate each other. The CIO wants a decision in 30 days. Walk me through exactly how you evaluate the technical merits, how you map those to the business budget, and how you communicate your final decision to the team that loses the argument.
Oh man, I love that. It's brilliant because there is no single right answer you can memorize from a textbook. The candidate has to show their work.
They have to think out loud.
Right. You get to see how they weigh risk, how they think about financial constraints, how they handle human conflict, and how they synthesize technical data into a business outcome. You are exploring how they balance delivery speed against catastrophic risk.
Exactly. And it is vital to emphasize, because this is where the traditionalists get very defensive, that these scenarios discussions are not soft HR alternatives to a technical assessment.
Some people will definitely think that.
There is a persistent myth that if you aren't making someone write code, you aren't doing a real technical interview. The framework argues the exact opposite.
How?
Exploring complex design trade-offs, governance models, and systemic risk is a much deeper, far more rigorous form of technical and professional assessment. It accurately reflects the daily, high-stakes reality of senior roles in a way that a generic coding screen simply never will.
It's testing the captain on their ability to read the weather and navigate the storm instead of timing how fast they can measure the engine bolts.
That's exactly it.
So what does this all mean? We've covered an immense amount of ground today for you listening. We've looked at this massive global contradiction that sits at the heart of the modern economy. Companies everywhere are desperately begging for resilient, strategic, future-ready talent.
They all want the best of the best.
They do. They want leaders who can handle AI integration, modern security threats, complex digital transformations. But then they take these incredibly capable, battle-tested people and force them through outdated, narrow, trivia-obsessed funnels that filter out the exact wisdom the company needs.
It ultimately comes down to a question of organizational maturity. And the framework concludes by bringing in an ethical dimension to this process, which I find incredibly sobering.
An ethical dimension?
Yes. When an organization forms an interview panel, they are handing a small group of people the power to influence life-changing decisions. Careers, livelihoods, and mental health are on the line in those rooms.
That's a huge responsibility.
When an organization wields that kind of power, it takes on a profound ethical responsibility.
And what is that responsibility?
The organization must prove that it is worthy of assessing the candidate.
Wow. The organization must prove it is worthy of assessing the candidate. That completely flips the power dynamic.
It does. When you invite a candidate with decades of hard-won experience to sit in the chair and prove their worth to you, you must be willing to prove that your process is actually capable of recognizing worth in forms other than its own reflection.
Right. You have to be ready to listen.
You must prove your interviewers are credible, trained, and self-aware. You must prove your methods are relevant to the actual work. Because if your process consistently rewards a polished, rehearsed image over honest, messy substance, Or if it prioritizes the interviewer's comfort zone over true role fit, you aren't just making a poor hiring decision.
You're doing something much
You
worse.
are creating avoidable, systemic unfairness. And over time, that erodes the foundation of trust in the entire professional ecosystem.
It's so true. You hear it from senior professionals all the time. They are quietly, deeply losing faith in the hiring system. They are realizing that career advancement increasingly depends more on theatrical audition skills and confidence packaging than on actual, honest, hard-won value.
It's a sad state of affairs.
It is. And that brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with. It builds on everything we've explored today, but it takes it one step further into the real world. Think about the physical and digital infrastructure we rely on every single day. The global banking networks that hold our money, the hospital data systems that manage our health, the power grids, the rapidly expanding AI algorithms that are beginning to shape our information and our laws.
The things that run society.
Exactly. If our entire global hiring system actively rewards candidates who are highly skilled at perfectly polishing the truth and simultaneously disqualifies the veterans who honestly communicate the messy, complex, dangerous architectural realities of building technology, what does that mean for the actual products and security systems being built around us right now?
That's a chilling thought.
Are we inadvertently engineering a much more fragile, dangerous world simply because our hiring processes are too immature, too defensive, and too obsessed with trivia to handle the truth? If we only hire the people who smile and say, everything is simple and I know all the answers, who is left in the building to see the hidden risks? Who is left to point out the flaws before the system collapses?
We need people who can handle the friction.
We do. It is a deeply unsettling thought. But it's one we have to face if we actually want to build a resilient future. We need assessment architectures that are mature enough to hear the truth.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems and the processes around you. Keep pushing for deeper understanding, and we will see you next time.